So we talked about Stormgate a couple times throughout this conversation. What are you thinking about Stormgate? What are your expectations for that game?
How much time do you have?
You go as long as you want.
uh, so I'm gonna start off with saying I am willing to be optimistic for lack of any other realistic option. In my opinion, there if they can't do it, no one can. And if that sounds like putting a lot of pressure on them, it is. So they have built and put together the best possible, maybe not the best possible, but by far the most competent on paper team for building an RTS game in the last decade. Like there is no one that I know of, and I like to think I'm in the know, especially a clearly StarCraft, Warcraft esque sort of Blizzard style RTS. Um, Now I'm gonna go with a little bit of background. I've been playing Beyond All Reason, which is a it's the spiritual successor to Total Annihilation, which I didn't play, or Supreme Commander, which I didn't play. But this is an open source, open development. It's literally just a bunch of volunteers in their free time. They don't even have a donate button because of like legal restrictions right now. So you like they just have some dudes paying for the server out of their pocket. But this game feels like it's had so much love put into it. You can tell the developers played the game, which is something that I'll just say, Relic has been a massive and utter disappointment. Um, Age of Empires 4 was maybe good on the surface. It looked good to many people, but as soon as you try to play it over 50 APM, my line is they tried to reinvent the wheel and came out with a block. Like they and now they announced it's coming out for console, which explains at least some of the design decisions. But they charge $60 for something that feels closer to Brood War to play than to like StarCraft or even Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition. Company of Heroes 3 releases for $60 to mixed reviews on Steam, even though they had an extra some months past the original date and like 5 years development. So, building an RTS game, not easy, I thought. And then I played Beyond All Reason, which I've been doing lately, which the UI is old school, but it has all these features like you can drag an attack move. So you just attack move, but in this area, and your units will only target things in that area. You can drag, like hold right click, and you make a formation. Like imagine splitting Marines X distance apart. There are all these little features and controls that they've made or adapted in an open source engine on their free time that feel like a new generation of RTS. So I think this rolls into I think Frost Giant, who I know, and I know I wanna call out Neuro of all people, okay? Because Neuro made a post after visiting Frost Giant, I think the second time, which was on brand for Neuro. He was very positive, very uh, intense, and it came off like the biggest PR post I've ever read. But that is just like if you've never met Neuro, that is just Neuro. I believe it fully that he feels that way. And I've met most of the people he's referencing, but I cannot imagine to someone just coming in like, who is this guy and why is he complimenting people who haven't released a single video of gameplay yet? Which is fair. But with Stormgate, I feel these people, they have every vested interest. A lot of them took a big risk just to join an indie studio. Like building an RTS studio in the 2020s is not probably the smartest business decision from many perspectives,
Yeah.
but I truly believe that everyone working there wants to build the next RTS game. And if I had to compare my expectations for Stormgate and what I've actually talked to the team to some extent about, what I would expect is not League of Legends, not Dota, but something like a Rocket League. I think Rocket League is the best example of a game that on its surface you can understand right now. It's soccer car. Like you got flying through the air, and then any noob can pick it up and have fun with it. They'll be very bad, but you can immediately see the good players. Like you can immediately understand those are good players. You might not know how they're doing it, but you know they're great players. It's great to watch. And I think Stormgate can be that for RTS.
Hmm.
It can be something that a new player can pick up and like with if you build it correctly from the ground up, which SC2 had tutorials tacked on. They just sent their newest interview. A lot of RTS tutorials are tacked on, or they even rely on like YouTubers, which I mean, good for me, but uh it can be a game you pick up and play with your friends. With the I have been and they're focusing on a big advocate for the 3v3 sort of modes, which might not grab the attention of your pro gamers, but I think it's very important to have stuff like this on top of a map editor, which they've said they're building alongside everything. And the SC2 map editor, and of course the Warcraft 3 map editor, which kind of started everything, has been the source of so much content outside of just hardcore 1v1 games. So I think Stormgate can be Rocket League for RTS if we need a soundbite there, because a game that's accessible to everyone has a clear definition of what skill looks like, but so much depth to it when you really get into it. But it's not intimidating because it's just fun to play in the first place. So SC2, on the other hand, and I think SC2 completely and utterly, they didn't drop the ball. They never picked up the ball on team games. Like it never, like there was no ball at all. It's team games is just you pasted. The fact that you can't build on your teammates' creep, even though that blocks the wall on some maps, like
Yeah.
clearly there's no effort put into team games at all. This is another thing where I think they can learn from. Well, there's plenty. Like Age of Empires 2 and Beyond All Reason have great systems for team games. Age of Empires 2 has each civilization has like a bonus that affects them and also their team. Like archers have +1 range or whatever. Beyond All Reason, you can easily transfer resources to and from. And in fact, one of my favorite features is if your teammates can't spend their resources and they're like over the cap, they get automatically sent to the rest of the team. So even if your teammates are, less experienced players, most players are pretty good at mining the resources. They just struggle to develop like a production or an army. So in that case, it actually benefits you. And a lot of this stuff could have been added in StarCraft 2 team games. I don't think, and in fact is in some of the sort of custom game stuff, but no effort at all. That's why I think the casual player base for StarCraft 2 never really materialized. Why in their interview they said that I'm not a real like this is a quote from Tim quoting someone else. I forget which Tim, not really important. But I'm not a real StarCraft player. I've only played campaign and I never really tried multiplayer. And then Tim responding like, you're like 75% of people, okay? Like don't worry. Like,
Yeah.
because there was never really that feel like with co-op. It grabbed, and co-op was the most popular part of StarCraft 2 and continues to be, especially with the mutators. I've seen the graph where co-op it goes up and then it slowly drops down every time a new commander. Then they added mutators. It's just a straight line, and then a new commander, it goes up, kind of comes back down. But those mutators kept people around. And that was the most basic, like just slap a few things on. There's so many examples of games you can steal these ideas or appropriate these ideas from. That I think Stormgate can, like you could implement them in StarCraft right now if you had both if you had the executive ability to do so. So I think a new game with these ideas built in, and I know they're thinking about it. You can, at risk of drawing people away, you can watch my interview with Kevin Dong. And I plan on doing another one. I plan on doing more interviews. I'm sure you are as well. As soon as we see some gameplay, I do agree. Past this point, until we see any gameplay, it does feel more like a fluff piece.
Yeah.
But I think we're getting to that point. They got the beta announced for this year. But I know Kevin, who is the lead game designer. He came from Team Liquid. He was a monk on Team Liquid. He wrote a bunch of in-depth articles about pro games. He was so knowledgeable about StarCraft 2 co-op, they hired him as the lead designer. And I mean, he knew more about co-op than probably anyone at Blizzard. Spreadsheets everywhere. Okay, way more detail and then he developed some of the coolest and most fun co-op commanders, the ones I actually enjoy playing because they're not like just StarCraft, but with a twist, like Manx, like Tychus, Stepman, that have these kind of cool mechanics that are different and but still fun and not frustrating. So I do think, and I in my increasingly elder age, I do appreciate these versus. I like how they're calling it 3VE is the intent for a lot of the content, and I really like the idea personally of in team games and maybe having an objective based team mode of having different roles, almost like class roles. I doubt it'll be exactly like that, but maybe you can pick from like how in you can pick masteries in co-op. Maybe you pick more like maybe one choice is to increase or have a certain defensive tower or something, and then another player mines resources faster, but they can't build that defensive tower, stuff like that. And then you combine that team together to face this mission and this mutator, and you can just keep slapping on dozens of different modifiers. Then you add in the map editor, and people will make even better stuff for you. And they've already talked about an interest in adding things to like the Steam Workshop that you couldn't do in StarCraft 2. Like you have things like in StarCraft 2, one of my favorite things I ever did was the announcer pack, which, oh, by the way, and part of the reason they get the benefit of the doubt was I just in 2017 or 18, I was like, I'll shoot my shot. I emailed Tim Morton. I'm like, hey, how about an announcer pack? Just thinking, what's the worst he says is no. Like,
Yeah.
I phrased it very nicely. He's like, let's do it. I'm like, oh wow, okay.
That's awesome.
So like that was one of my favorite things to do. I put a lot of work into that, but like that also tells you, and it doesn't make a lot of money. Like, like it's not selling tens of as much as I like to think. It's not selling tens of thousands of units. Probably cost more to make between paying me for it, which I didn't even realize they would do.
Hmm.
But I guess legally they should. Um, but like, Tim didn't have to. He could have just not. But he put the effort in, and he was interested in doing it, and that clearly interested. And I think with him, he's essentially the production director of the game. He's the one who decides what they're going to work on, and then kind of lets the qualified people do it. And I think it's been said many times that he's very good at that, letting people kind of do what they're good at. So the summary is I'm clearly optimistic. I think it's not going to be a StarCraft 2. It's not going to overtake Twitch. It's not going to replace a lot of the current. Well, it will likely, I think it will effectively, compared to what we've seen, destroy the StarCraft 2 scene.
Yeah.
I do think within months it will reduce the StarCraft 2 tournaments to like some weeklies and maybe the occasional major tournament, but within a year, if Stormgate is anywhere close to successful, it will be the effective end of StarCraft 2. But hopefully, for something better, which is something I haven't. It's very weird for me to say because for 10 years I've said I'll play the best RTS. So that has had the same answer for most of those 10 years. But so I'm optimistic. I'm not overly like it's going to be the biggest game ever, but I do think it can be something like a Rocket League for RTS.